30-minute session, and one that's really interesting and exciting because it's been around a little while, the old terminology of VUCA, but it's evolved, I think, and it's still with us. And so the panel discussion this afternoon is going to be a really interesting and exciting one. So the title of this panel discussion is A New Leadership for VUCA World. We have Kate, who is she's going to run the session as the chair for us, and then we'll get everyone to introduce themselves as they go. In terms of questions, obviously Kate's going to be fielding some questions to our panel here, but you might also have some questions that you might like to ask them too. So what we're going to try and do is leave a bit of time at the end for you to do that. But if you could use the app and put your question into the session, I'll pick them up and then we'll make sure we get them asked on your behalf. If we don't get to them for any reason, we do go into a break. So if you do want to kind of, I'd say pounce, but that sounds a bit harsh. But if you want to kind of go and have a chat with them afterwards, you're very welcome to as well. Okay, I'll hand over the mic to you and I'll let you rock and roll with it.
First of all, apologies. Is that working? First of all, apologies. Fairly obviously, I'm not Sarah Niblock, I'm Kate. Sarah, unfortunately, has had something that's happened outside the conference and has had to depart early. So I've stepped in. Please bear with me. I have been one of the judges for the Business Culture Awards for the past 9 years. I've also, once upon a time, been a winner. So know a little bit about it. I've just stepped down from being CPO for professional services business, and I sit on the board of DEMAT, which is a multi-academy trust with 40 schools and 4,000 employees scattered just north of London, and I also sit on a diversity charity board. We, as Jenny explained, are here to talk about leadership in a VUCA world. I suspect you all are very familiar with what VUCA means, but just in case you're not, the V stands for volatile, the U stands for uncertain, the C stands for complex, and the A stands for ambiguous. And it came about initially as a military term for the way in which warfare was changing, but now has been clearly applied to the business environment, and I'm not expecting you to say that it's a battlefield out there. However, if you look back at everything that's happened since the pandemic, the things that are happening now, with wars and the impact on supply chains. We do live in a very complex world. Perry himself this morning in the keynote was talking about moving from knowledge through AI into ultimately trying to be a bit more regenerative. That's all change. Look at the change that's happening in technology and the speed with which we're all leaping onto ChatGPT. There's a lot going on, and I'm sure an awful lot that we can talk about. And it is having a big impact on the way we need to lead people. So, I would like to ask each of you to introduce yourselves briefly so that we know who you are and how and why. And then without more ado, let's pile in.
Oh, hi everybody. I'm Sharon Lowry. I'm the Chief Executive of Be Caring. We're an employee-owned organisation. We're a social enterprise delivering home care and support to people with learning disabilities in the north of England. We've got about 1,000 staff, and we support about 1,200 people to live independently in their own homes. So a really sort of worthwhile cause.
Thank you, Sharon. Hi, everybody. My name is Claire Smith. I am the Chief People Officer for Movera, which nobody will have heard of because it was only created 6 months ago. And but what you may have used us for your conveyancing or your remortgage. We're the third largest conveyancer in the UK. And we're creating a platform business to improve the home moving experience of people, partner and clients, which I'm really excited to be part of. About 600 staff. We are PE backed. We've gone through several acquisitions, which brings all of the, maybe there's a few battlefield analogies, I don't know there, but brings all of the intricacies with that, and just delighted to be here and share some of the, perhaps some of the things we've learned and some of the mistakes we've made along the way.
Thanks, Claire. So my name is Mark Heisman. I'm the Group Chief Executive at Provide, which likewise you'll probably never have heard of. So we are a social enterprise that span out of the NHS about 14 years ago, providing healthcare services in mid-Essex. So we had that sort of whole NHS culture. But over the last 14 years, we've grown into the social care market, and we're about 1,300 employees, primarily based in Essex, but we've acquired businesses up in the northeast and in the middle of the country and elsewhere. So we're sort of gradually going into new markets in new places.
So as you can see, we've got a superb collection of individuals on the panel with a breadth of experience to bring. I would like to kick off with, can each of you tell us how you've actually changed your own leadership style and the skills and what impact maybe the pandemic and other such things have had on the way that you are now operating and what's been the driving force behind that change? So maybe if we kick off with you, Mark, and do you have any practical examples you can give us?
So I was appointed as chief exec in 2020, early 2020, so right at the start of COVID, which was a great time to take over a healthcare organisation. And I hadn't come from a healthcare background, so I have hundreds of very capable healthcare experts, but don't come from that background. And then suddenly going into an environment where the country was basically in meltdown. There was no certainty about what was going to happen. We had to immediately put in place a gold, silver and bronze command system, control system, with daily calls at the beginning of the day, end of the day. And if you think back, and it just seems like a distant memory now, doesn't it? But you think back, we didn't even have our own, there weren't enough masks to go around. We were going down to Screwfix and B&Q to buy masks for our staff. I mean, it was extraordinary, really, in those early days. And it was very, very command and control. Money was unlimited, which was great when you're running a company. But we had to make decisions very quickly. There were people's lives at stake. People were dying in our workforce because they were on the front line running COVID wards. So it was extremely, almost going back to a very old-fashioned military style of leadership. Over those last 4 years, we've migrated out of that, and we're now into a much more modern, culture-driven, values-driven stuff, and we'll pick that up later, I'm sure. But so as the leader of the organisation, I guess I've migrated from that very hands-on command and control style leadership through to a much more, I would say, a much more modern style leadership, which actually I'm much happier with and would have done in previous roles. But it's been interesting to see how that's developed over those 4 years.
Just briefly, what was the sector you'd come into the medical arena?
So prior to that, I was running a kids' charity.
Okay.
Yeah, providing camps and education for kids on a global scale.
So caring for
completely
people, but in a different
caring
way.
for people in a different way, yes. Yeah.
Sharon.
When I started at what was called CASA in 2018, we were in crisis, I think is fair to say. So the company was broken on lots of levels. We were running out of money quickly, culture, performance, quality. And I think that the first thing, we were in a highly regulated arena as well. So the first thing I thought, well, we need to stable the finances. We've got to do that. Otherwise, we're not going to be here in 3 months. But the second thing was, actually, we needed to establish the culture of how we were all going to work together and the behaviours and the vision and the mission. And we did that as an organisation. So that was the first year. COVID then hit not long afterwards. And as much as we'd gone through that exercise of establishing the vision and the mission, actually COVID really allowed us to come together as a group. We work across the north of England, so Newcastle, Leeds, Sheffield, Bradford, Manchester, Liverpool. And there's lots of mini cultures going on, and I've heard that being talked about today. So actually, as all coming together, every day on Teams, we didn't use Teams before then. It was, and also the commissioners left us alone to get on with it, and it was a real opportunity to figure out how to do this well. So I think we came out of COVID with an entirely different model to deliver care, to value the care workers, which really then you can start to build on the culture.
And did you keep the same people despite changing the model?
I think as the culture changed, people start, you soon realise who fits and who doesn't. So over time it has changed, but I think now, I don't even need to look at the system anymore because it's such a stable organisation. 20,000 visits are being delivered each week. It's certainly a different place to where we were 5 years ago.
And Claire, although Movera is very new, presumably you were involved in stuff during the pandemic and saw how things were changed. Would you like to share some of that with us?
Of course. So I've only been with Movera for 6 months, but prior to that I was in financial services and joined an organisation called Mortgage Advice Bureau in August 2020, when we thought we'd come through. The first time we thought we'd come through the pandemic. And what I saw there was the communication had been really poor during the pandemic. We'll just wait and see what the government tell us. We'll just wait and see. We'll rather than owning it ourselves as MAB at the time. And so when I joined the business in August 2020, communication wasn't great and nobody really understood the purpose. So I had to go in there and look at how we could redefine the mission and the vision to get people on board, because unless they're on board, they weren't going to listen to the communications anyway. So we went through an exercise. We went back into lockdown. So we had to do all of this work to redefine the mission, the vision, and to create a whole new set of behaviours, our DNA, as it was called, during working from home. So that immediately brought everybody together, because the working groups, the workshops, everything was done on Teams. So I think to go through an exercise like that, it was launched in April 2021, virtually. So the fact that we're able to get MAB, there was some like 300 people on a live launch. The communication then followed. They knew the North Star, they knew where we were going. And then I've taken those learnings around communication into Movera. So again, it's in the property sector, very, very volatile. I had to look up VUCA, and I think both Sharon and Mark did as well. So if anyone's sitting there saying they don't know what it was, I didn't know either. But yes, volatile it was as the property market. The property market stayed open during the pandemic, which was brilliant, but people felt it. Burnout, people were suffering. I've gone into Movera, which is again in the property world, and we're on the front foot with communicating now. We fully expect with whatever happens with the election or interest rates, the markets will change. We don't want our people to feel stressed. The minute that the first-time buyers market opens up again, we know we'll be hit with new amounts of work, which is brilliant. We're in growth. We're building, we're growing. Fantastic. But what to be is on the front foot to communicate. So we are communicating everything we're doing around talent attraction and investing tons in talent retention. So I've taken the learnings from the pandemic of not communicating enough and taken them with me, and we're on the front foot now to make sure we protect the well-being of our colleagues. And that's one of our greatest learnings, I would say, that I've took with me.
Excellent, thank you. You've all touched on this slightly, but I think it'd be quite useful to do a bit of a discussion about the balance between rules-based and values-based leadership. Whereabouts would you say your organisation is on the spectrum now? Some of you have described where it was a while ago. What do you think should be done, command and control for all the succession plans out there versus free for all and Netflix? What do you think is the right place for the pendulum to be at the moment? And with a bit of a hat on for where we think we're going, where do we need to be? Let's kick off with you, Sharon.
I think it's obviously we're regulated by CQC, which is very much about rules, regulation, systems, processes, auditing, evidence. So to balance that with a values-based culture, was quite tricky. And at one point I was thinking, this is hard. But actually, because we'd got the culture right, the foundations, the vision, the mission, the values, it was then much easier to build in the systems and the processes. I'm sure CQC wanted me to do it the other way around. They weren't too happy at one point. But actually, we've got a solid foundation where we've got to do both. There's no other way around it. I don't know if anybody knows how home care is commissioned. It's very much task and time. Somebody can cancel, somebody can go into hospital, that you stop getting paid. You've then no option but to put carers on 0 hours contracts. It's absolutely atrocious. So we've really had to challenge how that's commissioned, because unless we value our care workers, the people doing amazing work on the ground, it's just going to crumble. So the model we've got, it is very much structured around the rotas. They're valued, they're paid in shifts. But when they've got a gap on their rota and somebody's in hospital, actually what we're saying is make a difference. Use your initiative. You see these people, you see them more than anybody. You know when somebody's a bit out of sorts, if somebody's... So I think we've tried to create a model which accommodates the regulation, but makes people feel valued in what they're doing, and they're supported and empowered to be responsive to what's going on in their communities. So I think it's a bit of both for us.
If I can just, whilst we're not in the same regulated environments, being predominantly in the legal sector, heavily regulated,
Yes,
we work with lots of lenders and building societies who themselves are regulated. And we make a joke about mandatory training. So that, like, anyone hears the word mandatory, somebody goes, don't say that word. It's not, can we just go, it's just the way we do things around here. So we're trying to blend what the requirements are of the regulator into our values and talk about we want brilliant people with explorer mindsets who want to adopt innovative technology. So we tend to look at the pillars on which we've got at Movera and blend the requirements of the regulator, which is basically to keep our people safe and our customers safe. Who doesn't want to do that? So we're just looking at the language of the regulator. I've wrestled internal comms from head of professional services because that is definitely command and control. Definitely, if you've not done your Bribery Act training by the 1st of April. Whew. So we've tried to kind of work with them, and there's lots of laughter here. But we've worked with that team to say, tell us the message you need to get across, tell us the outcome. When it comes to communications, what do you want people to know? How do you want them to feel? What do you want them to do? And that's very much the kind of model we use for comms. I said that's what I've took with me as a learning from our previous business. So I think, yes, we're the same as Sharon. We know we've got to follow the rules, but we're using the values of the business and the spirit of the business and the culture to be able to enable that. That's just the way we do things around here. And one live example is this morning we had a live all teams call. We do it every month with that's the entire business. And I got our head of info security to come on. And I could see him thinking, I can't believe you've done this. But we just broke it right down to basics about the reason he's in role. Yes, he's got a role, but it's about keeping us all safe. So I think it's taking the rules and building them into your culture and working alongside your values rather than trying to have one or the other. I think it's that blend.
So I inherited this sort of very rules-based culture, similar to you, very CQC, lots of NHS sort of DNA through the organisation, and wanted to move it to exactly what you're saying, this sort of values-based organisation. So how do you do that? During COVID, very difficult because of what we were just saying a minute ago. So we thought, how do we practically do that afterwards? And I'd say there's a couple of things I was going to pick up. One is that we rebranded and we called ourselves Provide Community as opposed to just Provide, which actually, if you're only here for the last presentation, is perfect sort of analogy, because the three things that the guy was talking about was community, community, community as being the key thing. So I didn't know that at the time, but anyway. So we rebranded ourselves as Provide Community, and we put some, rather than just nice logos and new name badges, we just wanted to put something solid underneath that. So we said, community, there's three communities that we're working with here. We're working with the communities that we serve, and we're a social enterprise, so we have to make a profit. We're not a charity, but what we do with our profit is what's important. So we put some of our profit, surplus, call it what you like, into our local communities. And we said, as long as it's a charity, any single person in the organisation can nominate something that's important to them, and we don't care if it's the local Church Ruth, the DFE group, the local Stroke Association, we will fund it. You don't have to fill in a form, we will fund that charity. Now, there was a risk with that because we did get some fairly wacko charities, including funding the Ferret Society in Dorset. But anyway, if you put your head on the block and you say you're going to fund a charity, you have to then back it up. So we put some money back into the communities. That's moving us from that rule-based to that sort of values. This is our value. We then said we're actually going to invest in the services that we're running, and we run probably 60 or 70 different services across the organisation. We're going to put money into innovation so that innovation, that innovative mindset can actually begin to transform what we do rather than it being just something on the wall. So we've invested in that, and things have come out of that. For example, many of our district nurses now will go out with a headset, with a camera on it, so that we don't have to send two nurses out, we can send one, and then they can link it to Teams. They've got a tiny little thing here in front of their eye, so they can be making changing a dressing, they need to talk to a matron or to talk to someone specialist. They can do so immediately without having to hold their camera in a fairly awkward way. So that's a practical example of innovation that's come out of that values-based approach. The third thing we did is we said, so we're employee-owned, a bit like John Lewis. We said, well, actually, we're going to put some of our profits / surplus into you, the Provide community. So we're going to give you a profit share plan every year. So we've done that now for the last 2 years, where it's not a huge amount of money, but there is something that's tangibly going back into the community of the organisation. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I was going to say briefly was, before COVID, we had 4 values: care, compassion, innovation, and fun. For obvious reasons, during COVID, we took fun out, because it just wasn't appropriate to have on the side of a ward our values are care, compassion, innovation, and fun when people were dying or going through incredible pain and distress. So we took it out, just didn't think it was appropriate. And we decided after COVID not to put it back in again, but to have it as our unwritten value. So it actually underpins everything we do. Every decision we make as an SLT or as a board, we're thinking, where is the fun factor in that? But what we're doing is trying to make it wise how we articulate that to our customers, patients and service users.
Each of you have described ways in which you have changed internally and are within a regulated environment, more values driven. What do you think the main benefits of that have been for your organisations?
I can jump in here. So only being 6 months in, the first thing I wanted to do was get a temperature check of the population. There hadn't been any colleague engagement surveys done, and that was one of the first things I did, to go in and ask things like, the link to the values and leadership and things like that. And I think by communicating and lead on values, what we've then done is presented back the results 1 month later, which apparently is very quick. I didn't know that was quick. I was just like, well, why wouldn't we? We've asked everybody to complete it. And we've shown them the plan for what we're going to do in each area, when we're going to ask for the next round of feedback. We've shared what we can do. We've shared what we can't do and why. Mm-hmm. And we've just used that. We want to have an explorer mindset. So what we're going to do is we're going to explore some of the things you've asked us to do. And we're going to communicate with you what we can and can't do. But by the way, this is not being led by the people team, volunteers for the working groups, because, making sure that these things happen. So I think we've taken the values and the pillars we have about having brilliant people and our vision to be, employee of choice in our industry, is we've done that, and we've got a live example of doing that right now with the colleague engagement survey. We've set the date when we're going to rerun it again in September. We've shared the stats, the good, the bad and the ugly. We've called out, and I heard in the previous room, CEOs challenging people to ask any questions. Well, come and ask me then, don't do it anonymously. We had 45% of our colleagues put their name to the survey, which I thought was a great start for 10. We'd like to get that up. So I think we're on a journey, and that's something I've said for the last 10 years, working in culture. We're on a journey, but the lessons we've learned from aligning the values with our approach to leadership now is bringing people on that journey with you, relating things back to the values and communicating. So now the hard work's to be done, but we've gone out there and we've said we're doing it, and we've kick-started some of it. And I think just that transparency. And then the other thing, I guess, that we've took with us is this. We talk a lot about safe space. I think everybody talks about that in the people and culture world now, and creating a safe space. How do you actually do that? So we're talking at the leadership levels of showing their vulnerabilities in one of the sessions earlier. How comfortable are we as leaders getting it right between oversharing and vulnerability? And what we're starting to do is just share little bits of the behind the scenes of our exec, the home life of the exec, getting our CEO to proudly parent that 3:00 on a Friday he picks up his kids. Mm-hmm. Please tell everybody you do that. Sorry, I waffled on a little bit there with a few different things. All good examples. But I think it's linking things like the engagement survey to your values and being transparent and communicating it. That's what's working for us right now.
I think in a very, very challenging sector, and I'll try to stop going on about it, but it's a lot.
I'm intrigued about recruitment in your sector.
Well,
and
so
retention.
I think this. So we are very similar. John Lewis, like the John Lewis model. We give everybody a gift card on their birthday, and for some carers it's the only card they get, and it really makes such a difference. We work in the most deprived areas in the north of England. Our carers in themselves suffer a lot of challenges at home, domestic violence, cost of living. It's tough. But I think because we're 100% employee-owned, I'm very fortunate not to have private equity or investors. We are debt-free, we've got cash in the bank. But what I can do is actually go to the commissioners and say, I'm sorry, but you can't, £10.50 doesn't get you 30 minutes of care. Then to pay the carers their travel time, to fund the back office infrastructure, their holiday pay, their training. So I've got a voice because I can speak, it's employee owned, and I wouldn't be doing my job if we were mistreating and undervaluing the workforce. So fast forward 6 years, we don't rely on a sponsored workforce, which I know a lot of home care organisations do. I think 92% of our colleagues recommended us as a place to work. So it's just had a huge impact. And be caring is one of our values. Be happy is actually, and I was deliberating, thinking, is that appropriate? But actually,
yes, it is.
Be kind, be involved, be the best you can be, and these are all, and be safe actually. So they're still appropriate 6 years after going through that exercise.
Mark, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, just I think metrics are really important, that we measure this. And again, coming from our organisation, coming from an NHS background, where the NHS sort of does surveys to death, everything's surveyed this, surveyed that. There's survey fatigue, people don't fill in surveys. Generally, the results are pretty bad. And I just felt we needed to get a new benchmark. So 3 years ago, we did our first colleague engagement survey with a new company, nothing to do with the NHS, who've done, similar to the guy before actually, who've done lots of different organisations. So you've got a benchmark in different sectors. And it came back with an engagement score of 90%. And I was staggered. I thought, this is extraordinary. I don't quite know how we've got there, but it was really good. Then we did it again the second year, and I was just waiting for it to sort of drop to 60% or something. Last year was an aberration, but actually it went to 92%. And then last year, this is just finished, again, I thought, well, it can't, you get to a point where, what else do you do? Because we keep coming up with new ideas of trying to drive engagement and so on. It went to 94%, which I don't take the credit for. It's an organisational thing. And people say, well, what was the golden bullet? And I'd say there wasn't a golden bullet. Actually, there's a whole variety of stuff, whether it be gifts. And I think gifts are actually really important if you can afford to do it. Little thank yous. I do a video once a week. I've done it every year for 4 years now. 1 minute, a minute with Mark, which goes to all of our staff, all our colleagues. And likewise, I try and be personal. You know, I've got the day off today, and I'm going to go and see the grandkids, or I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Initially, people were like, "Oh no, we can't do videos." Now, people love doing videos, and video is an incredible. As long as you keep it short, I think anything longer than a minute, people don't watch. But incidentally, that's to the side. So Sunday was International Nurses Day, and we've got hundreds and hundreds of nurses, and our senior leadership team in our health division did a video just thanking our nurses. And it was actually really moving. And 2 or 3 years ago, they would never have done that. They wouldn't have had the confidence to do it, wouldn't have thought of doing it. But actually, little things like that all add up to trying to be creative about how you're living those values. And I think the big challenge that we have, and I guess you guys have as well, is to be constantly coming up with new stuff, keeping it fresh, because people forget very quickly, and it becomes part of the norm what you're doing. I did a call with someone this morning, and they said, it'd be nice to have this. I said, well, you do realise you get this, and this at the moment? And they said, yes, we do, but what else is there? It's like giving a present to your kids, isn't it? They always want the next one. So there's an element of that, I feel, with our colleagues, to keep it fresh, keep it new, keep coming up with different ways of engaging them.
Thank you for leading me into my next question. You have all admirably described what it was like, the changes you've introduced, and where you currently are, and the benefits that has brought. We're meant to be talking about coping within the VUCA environment. We know there's more change on the horizon. What's your advice and predictions for what's coming down the road? And what do you as organisations, but potentially all the leaders in this room, need to think about in order to be able to cope? Claire, should we kick off with you?
Thank you. I mean, we've probably heard AI mentioned so many times. We perhaps could have done AI bingo today, couldn't we? We're looking forward to that. We have brilliant people working for us, and we will use tech when we can, but people when we need to. We're very much embracing that dual approach to looking after our clients, but also our colleagues. I think I talked about this on an earlier session, going back to basics a bit about when it comes to leadership skills. We've heard about multifaceted leadership earlier today. I think Perry was talking about it. We do have to still remember we're here to listen, and there's different levels of listening, and I think mine's always keep the communication going. It really is. You are right, we have to keep things fresh. In the markets we're in at the moment, the property market took such a hit in COVID. 3,000 professionals left the industry as conveyancing practitioners because of stress, burnout, they'd had enough. So the market's super competitive, so we're always having to think. But we've just done some basics, we've tied some benefits back to our vision. Okay, so we're helping people buy their dream home, next home, downsize. What are we doing for our own people when they move in? So just things like, right, well, we'll give you the day off to move house. We've tied some things back to basics. So I think we're looking forward for talent attraction, but don't forget the talent retention piece. And as leaders, particularly exec and senior leaders, being able to switch the different styles of leadership depending on what you've got in front of you, and being authentic. It's okay to show vulnerabilities. So for me, it's reminding ourselves of what's worked well in the past, but being really agile and communicating as much as you can. That's been definitely helping me.
Combining
Yes.
the two. Mark?
I think that's great, but I think there's also something about risk and approach to risk, appetite to risk, because I think we need to become less risk averse. Now that's a bit controversial to say that.
That was shown slightly in the last one just before this.
But risk is being prepared to take calculated risks. I think will set aside organisations who are really thriving, and particularly around people. So I've got 5 kids in their 20s and 30s. All of them think they can do my job. I mean, they've always thought that since they were about 4, actually. But anyway, and actually, do you know what? I think they probably could. They would foul up a few times. They'd make some massive mistakes. They'd need coaching and mentoring and training and development, all those interventions. But actually, when are organisations going to be prepared to take those sort of risks, particularly in our sectors? Because I think we are so conscious of risk that we don't actually invest in the tomorrow.
Sharon?
I think I totally agree with what you're saying. I think I'm constantly hearing how technology is going to be the solution, you know, all this assistive technology to support people to live independently in their own homes, and all of these sensors and I just think, do you know what, unless you've got a stable workforce that are valued, that are there to use the technology to support the implementation, to support the people in their own homes, it's never going to quite work. So our strategy is value our workforce but embrace the technology. So very similar to what you were saying. We're also building our own digital platform to deliver the new model of care that which I think could be a bit of a game changer for local authorities with you know, who are cash strapped. And it's for us, it's
Could
about.
you share a bit of that?
Well, it's very much linked to being able to value your care workforce, pay them in shifts and empower them to make a difference while having quite a lean back office infrastructure, because there is very, very little money out there. So we've done it the hard way with pivot tables, data coming out of our ears, but you're having to scramble to get it. So it's developing some technology to actually help us focus our precious resources in the right areas, probably to manage some of the risk. There is that, but you just cannot lose. We've got a remote work, you know, they're out there working in isolation. Twice a year we bring them in, we call it coffee and cake session. We give them long service awards. There's lots of cake, you know, there's so much cake. And I think my nerve, at one point I think I'd know every care worker go in, but as you get bigger it becomes harder. And I think that's my sort of grappling with, how do we really keep this culture, amazing culture that we've created whilst getting bigger, because we want to grow, you know, we want to do this and deliver this model elsewhere. So it probably doesn't answer the question, does it? The one thing I would say is, if you've got a strong, stable team, 12 months ago we had a cyber attack, so all of our systems went down and we had to manually coordinate 20,000 visits on Excel, and they missed one visit that week. It was nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do with me, just incredible. But without that stable team, it would have fallen over. So people are key, aren't they? Teamwork, valuing people, and we haven't got much money, so it is them feeling that they're part of something, part of a purpose, making a difference. I think that's really what sets us apart. I'm hoping anyway.
I've asked an awful lot of questions. Jenny asked early on for people to put stuff into the app. Has anybody chucked any questions forward?
Just check. No, we haven't. But I just wondered if anyone on the floor got some questions you might like to ask the panel, or what you've heard, or something connected or related that might be helpful to answer. Yeah, well, I want to say a huge thank you then for what has been an amazing afternoon. It's really great actually just to listen to different insights and what different organisations are grappling with, because I think sometimes we always think we're in our own little worlds of work, and we realise that everyone else has been nudged and pushed and strained and stretched. So thank you so much for sharing very openly what's been going on in your organisations. And yeah, I guess we need to embrace this VUCA world and keep on going. So thank you very much. So just give them a quick round of applause.